He screamed that his family issues were none of my business, acting like I had touched a live wire. So I stopped asking. Then came the night his mother dragged 3 suitcases into my penthouse and accidentally whispered a figure that made my blood run cold. $180,000. In that split second, the truth hit me hard. I was never his fiancé. I was just a financial bailout waiting to be cashed out. My name is Marissa Caldwell, and at 34 years old, I have curated a life that operates with the precision of a Swiss watch. My penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay in Seattle is not just a home. It is a fortress of glass and steel, a testament to order. I deal in data, in risk assessment, in the absolute certainty of numbers. Chaos is an error to be corrected, not a lifestyle to be embraced. Up until last night, I thought my life was perfectly balanced. Gavin Holt fit into this aesthetic perfectly, or so I thought. He was the charming variable in my equation, sitting across from me at the mahogany table, swirling his scotch. We were supposed to be finalizing the venue contract, a moment that usually calls for champagne and shared glances. Instead, his eyes were glued to his phone. His thumbs moved across the screen with a frantic energy, like a soldier tapping out a distress signal in enemy territory. Every vibration of the device made his shoulders tense. I placed my fountain pen down on the document, the metallic click echoing in the quiet room. I needed clarity regarding the officiant, his uncle. It was a standard query regarding our prenuptial agreements and liability, nothing more than due diligence. "Gavin," I said, keeping my voice even, "regarding your uncle officiating, does he have any current legal standings that might void the ceremony? I need to know if there are any complications. We need to ensure the marriage license is unassailable." The reaction was immediate and disproportionate. Gavin slammed his glass down so hard the stem snapped. Amber liquid bled across the white tablecloth like a fresh wound. He leaned in, his face contorted into a mask of ugly desperation, his charm evaporating instantly. "My family issues are none of your business," he hissed through clenched teeth. He glared at me, his chest heaving. "Stop acting like some heartless auditor for 5 minutes and just be my fiancé. Can't you just be normal?" The silence that followed was heavy. I watched him closely. Immediately after his outburst, his hand flew to the inside pocket of his jacket. It was a quick, unconscious pat, a check. He was reassuring himself that something was still there, a weapon, a passport, or perhaps a secret he was terrified to lose. It was a tell. He was not angry. He was terrified. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I simply folded my hands on the table. "You are right," I lied, my voice terrifyingly calm. "I apologize. I overstepped. It will not happen again." The sudden lack of resistance threw him off balance. He blinked, expecting a fight, but I gave him a surrender. He thought he had won. He thought he had extinguished the fire. He smiled nervously and reached for my hand, apologizing for his stress. But the damage was already archived in my mind. That night, while the rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my bedroom, I did not weep into my silk pillowcases. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I created a new encrypted folder. I named it Operation Silent Ledger. I logged the date. I logged the trigger, which was the question about his family. I logged the reaction. I treated his outburst not as an emotional event, but as a data point. The first piece of hard evidence arrived the very next morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, waking me before the alarm. It was a security alert from the bank regarding the supplementary card I had given Gavin for incidental wedding costs. The transaction was time-stamped at 3:07 in the morning. I looked at the sleeping form of Gavin beside me. He had claimed to be exhausted, asleep since midnight. Yet, while he lay there breathing rhythmically, his card had been active across town. The notification showed a purchase at a 24-hour convenience store in a neighborhood he had no business being in. I stared at the glowing screen. A cold realization settled over me. Asking questions only made him defensive. It made him careful. If I wanted the truth, I had to stop asking. I would let the silence stretch. I would let the numbers speak for him. I would not move until I knew exactly where the finish line was. And I would not strike until I had the leverage to crush him completely. The data began to arrange itself on my screen like cracks spreading across a windshield, beautiful in their geometry, but signaling an imminent shatter. I pulled up the transaction history for the past 6 months and applied a filter for time and location. The pattern was so obvious it was insulting. Every Thursday evening, without fail, there was a cluster of spending that had nothing to do with the late-night strategy meetings Gavin claimed to be attending. The merchant codes told a sordid story. A day spa on 4th Avenue, a boutique hotel bar known for its discretion, a champagne lounge. These were not business expenses. They were courtship rituals. I scrolled down and found something even more brazen. On the 1st of every month, a massive automatic transfer left our joint account and went to an entity called Holt Advisory LLC. Gavin had sold this to me as a retainer for business consulting, essential for his networking. I dug into the metadata. The LLC was registered to a residential address, his mother's condo. It was $5,000 a month. I wasn't paying for professional advice. I was funding their lifestyle. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the glass top of my desk. It was Vivian Rowe, an old friend from university who now worked as a lifestyle columnist. We hadn't spoken in months, which made the preview text chilling. "I'm sorry, but you need to see this." I hesitated for a fraction of a second before opening the attachment. It was a high-resolution photo, clearly taken through the display window of an upscale boutique in downtown Seattle. The lighting was perfect, illuminating Gavin's face. He was laughing, looking younger and more carefree than he ever looked with me. Leaning against him was a girl who looked like she had been manufactured in a lab for influencers' glossy hair. Perfect skin. I recognized her from the social pages. Sloane Ryder. She was holding up a dress that likely cost more than a mid-size sedan. But the detail that made my breath hitch was not the girl. It was the hand extending a credit card to the sales clerk. It was Lenora Holt, Gavin's mother. She was smiling at Sloane with a warmth she had never once directed at me. I looked back at my monitor. My banking dashboard refreshed in real time. There it was. A pending transaction at that exact boutique. The timestamp matched the metadata on the photo to the minute. Lenora was buying a dress for her son's mistress, using the platinum supplementary card I had given her for wedding-related emergencies. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, but it didn't bring tears. It brought clarity. They were not just betraying me. They were actively managing a transition. They were using my resources to groom and upgrade my replacement. I wasn't a partner in their eyes. I was a venture capital firm. They were defrauding before they closed the round and moved on to the next investor. I picked up my phone and dialed the priority line for my private banker. "I need to make an immediate security update," I said, my voice steady. "Freeze the supplementary card ending in 4028. Yes, the one issued to Lenora Holt. Mark it as compromised." "Certainly." "Ms. Caldwell, should we notify the cardholder?" "No," I commanded. "Reroute all security alerts and fraud notifications to my secure encrypted email. Remove my primary cell phone from the notification loop entirely. I do not want a single buzz or beep to alert anyone that the system has changed." I hung up and turned my attention back to the autopay list. I found the recurring charges for what Gavin called venue deposits. I traced the receiver. It was a luxury concierge service that specialized in procuring hard-to-find luxury goods and reservations. I clicked cancel. I found the floral arrangement retainers that were actually weekly deliveries to Lenora's address. Cancel. I severed every single financial artery that Gavin and his family had attached themselves to. I sat back in the silence of my penthouse. Gavin was likely still at the boutique, perhaps suggesting matching shoes. completely unaware that the card in his mother's hand was now a useless piece of plastic. He thought he was playing a sophisticated game, but he had forgotten who built the board. Modern warfare does not begin with a gunshot. It begins with a single line of text on a screen reading "access denied," and I had just pushed the button. I did not need to be in the boutique to witness the carnage. I could hear it in the frantic, high-pitched screech of Lenora's voice over the phone. I imagined the scene perfectly. The card had been declined. Then the backup card had been declined. And standing there, watching the humiliation unfold, was Sloane Ryder? For the first time, the young mistress was looking at her potential mother-in-law not as a golden ticket, but as a broken ATM. Marissa Lenora shouted into the receiver, "You need to fix this immediately. The clerk is staring at me like I am a criminal." It says the issuer blocked the transaction. I held the phone away from my ear, typing calmly on my laptop. I put on my best distracted executive voice. "I am in the middle of a board meeting. Lenora." I lied smoothly. "The bank upgraded their security protocols this morning. The system is extremely sensitive to unusual spending patterns. It flags anything that deviates from the approved wedding budget parameters." "Well, unblock it," she demanded. "We are at the counter. I cannot access the banking system for at least 3 hours," I replied, checking my nails. Then I dropped the bait. "You are with a friend." "Right. Why doesn't she cover it for now? I will reimburse her next week." The silence on the other end was heavy and suffocating. It was the sound of a mask shattering. Lenora could not ask Sloane to pay. That would ruin the illusion of limitless wealth they had built to seduce her. It would reveal that without me, the Holt family was hollow. That won't be necessary," Lenora stammered, her voice suddenly small. She hung up. When Gavin came home that evening, he looked like a hunted animal. He didn't greet me with a kiss. He marched straight to the kitchen island where I was reviewing a portfolio. "What the hell did you do with the cards?" he asked, trying to sound authoritative but failing. My mother called me in tears. She said she couldn't even buy lunch. I looked up, widening my eyes in feigned innocence. "Is there a problem with the wedding budget?" I asked. "I set the algorithms to protect our future assets. We agreed to be fiscally responsible, didn't we?" He opened his mouth to argue, but closed it. He couldn't fight me without admitting what the money was actually for. He stormed into the living room to decompress with his usual video games and market simulators. But I had another surprise waiting. I had downgraded our fiber optic internet package to the absolute basic tier. The high-speed connection he relied on for his streaming and day trading simulations was gone. I watched from the hallway as the buffering wheel spun on the television screen. It circled endlessly, a digital eye mocking him. "Why is the internet so slow?" he yelled. "Budget cuts," I called back cheerfully. "We are saving for the honeymoon. Remember later." He tried to buy something online, probably a gift to apologize to Sloane. A notification popped up on my smartwatch. It was a 2-factor authentication code. I had reset every joint shopping account to require a code sent only to my device. "Did you get a code?" he shouted from the other room. I swiped the notification away and ignored him. Without my permission, he was digitally paralyzed. He was learning what it felt like to be a guest in his own life. The inconveniences piled up like snow. The next morning, I canceled the executive black car service that usually drove him to his meetings. I watched from the balcony as he stood on the curb in the drizzle, waiting for a budget ride share that was 12 minutes away. The layer of executive polish was being stripped away, revealing the desperate man beneath. Dinner brought the final humiliation. I had canceled the organic grocery delivery service. When he opened the refrigerator, expecting premium steaks and craft beer, he found only sparkling water and empty shelves. "There is no food," he said, baffled. "I have been too busy to shop." I replied without looking up from my book. "You can handle dinner tonight." He ended up bringing home a frozen pizza, the kind with cardboard crust. He cooked it in the oven, looking out of place in my gourmet kitchen. He was a parasite who was finally being forced to hunt for his own scraps. But the most telling detail came 2 days later. I noticed his wrist was bare, his vintage chronograph, a limited edition piece he bragged about constantly, was gone. Then I noticed a pair of his designer loafers was missing from the closet. He was selling his props. He was liquidating his own possessions to keep the cash flowing to Lenora and Sloane, desperate to keep the play going for just a few more days. He was burning his own furniture to keep the house warm, and he had no idea that I was the one controlling the thermostat. It was a Tuesday night, and the rain was hammering against the glass walls of the penthouse. My security app pinged with a motion alert at the front entrance. On the screen, I saw a black SUV double-parked in the fire lane. The doors flew open, and out stepped the unholy trinity Lenora, Gavin's younger brother Jace, and his so-called Aunt Bridget. They were not carrying overnight bags. They were dragging 3 massive suitcases, the wheels skidding over the wet pavement. They looked less like guests and more like an occupying army. They bypassed the doorman. Gavin must have given them a code and marched straight into my living room without knocking. Lenora looked around my pristine, minimalist sanctuary and curled her lip in disgust. "God, it is freezing in here," she complained, dropping her fur coat onto my white sofa. "It feels like a dental office." "Jace, turn up the heat. I am taking the guest suite with the view." Jace threw himself into my Eames lounge chair and propped his muddy sneakers directly onto the glass coffee table. It was a deliberate territorial mark. They were not asking for permission. They were establishing dominance through habit. Gavin hurried over to me, his face pale and sweating despite the air conditioning. "Babe, I am so sorry," he stammered, blocking my view of his family. They need to stay for a few weeks. It is just so much easier for the wedding prep if we are all in one place." "You know how Mom gets about. Logistics." I looked at the mud on my table. I looked at the entitlement on their faces. A normal person would have screamed. I simply smiled, a tight, polite expression that did not reach my eyes. "Of course," I said softly. "Family is important." Gavin exhaled, thinking he had managed the crisis. But as I turned to hang up their wet coats in the hallway closet, the acoustics of the penthouse worked in my favor. Their voices drifted from the living room, low and urgent. They thought I was out of earshot. "The deadline on the file is the 1st of the month," Bridget whispered harshly. "If we do not show liquidity by then, they will move to seize the assets." I paused, my hand gripping Lenora's damp fur. Bridget was using specific legal terminology. "The creditor has already applied for a writ of execution," Bridget continued. "We are running out of stalls. We just need him to sign the marriage license. Once that paper is filed, we can touch the joint assets. It becomes marital property." "Relax. Auntie," Jace's voice cut in, dripping with arrogance. Gavin, has her wrapped around his finger. We pay off the civil judgment, and the rest is gravy." Then came the number. It was not a vague debt. It was precise. $180,000. Jace laughed. "Small change for her. Life-changing for us. I just need my black card back." Lenora's voice was frantic, breathless. "The women at the club are starting to whisper, I cannot be seen declining a bill again. It is humiliating." The picture finally resolved into high definition. This was not a wedding. It was a rescue operation. They were drowning in a $180,000 judgment debt, and I was the life raft they intended to puncture. Gavin suddenly appeared in the hallway, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the kitchen. He pinned me against the marble counter, cupping my face in his hands. He looked deep into my eyes, using the same intense gaze that had made me fall for him a year ago. "Marissa, look at me," he said, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "I know they can be a lot, but please, just for me, keep the peace. Do not ask them about their business. My mother is very proud. Just let it be." Can you do that for us? It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was asking for my silence so he could rob me blind. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal of my phone. I slid my thumb over the side button, activating the voice recorder. I understand, I said, my voice steady. I won't ask any questions. I walked back into the living room to pour them drinks. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them loose. I wanted every single word recorded on tape, signed by their own voices, sealing their fate. I slipped out of the penthouse before the sun had even crested the horizon, leaving the Holt family snoring in their unearned luxury. The city was gray and quiet as I made my way to the offices of Whitfield and Klein. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and expensive leather. Waiting for me were two people who specialized in the anatomy of deception: Caleb Rourke, a private investigator who could find a needle in a digital haystack, and Dana Whitfield, a forensic accountant and attorney who viewed the world through the lens of liability. Dana did not waste time with pleasantries. She had the stack of wedding contracts that Gavin had urged me to sign over the last week. She slid a venue agreement across the polished table, her finger tapping a paragraph buried deep in the addendum. "Marissa, you need to read Clause 14b very carefully," Dana said, her voice sharp. "The language here is deliberately convoluted. It states that the primary signatory accepts full liability for, and I quote, all pre-existing financial obligations of the organizing party necessary to facilitate the event. In plain English, you are not just paying for a wedding. You are agreeing to underwrite his debts." I stared at the paper. It was a trap laid in 12-point font. But Caleb was already moving the conversation forward. He projected an email chain onto the wall monitor. It was the thread containing the updated prenuptial agreement that I had received 3 days ago, supposedly from my own lawyer. We ran a trace on the email headers, Caleb said, his face grim. "This did not come from your attorney's firm. It was routed through a spoofing server to look legitimate, but the source IP is local. It came from inside your apartment, specifically from a laptop with the MAC address registered to Gavin Holt." He zoomed in on the signature page. "And this," Caleb pointed to my scrawl at the bottom, "this is a digital forgery. He lifted your signature from a tax document you signed 2 years ago and pasted it here. This document was designed to waive your rights to separate property the moment you say, 'I do.' It is clumsy, but legally. It creates a mess that would take years to untangle." I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. They were not just mooching, they were setting a legal bear trap. Caleb then slid a physical file across the table. It was a mugshot. The face was younger, the hair shorter, but the eyes were unmistakably Gavin's. "Meet Derek Lang," Caleb said. He changed his name 5 years ago after a civil enforcement action in Chicago. Investment fraud. He didn't go to prison, but he was hit with a massive civil penalty and barred from holding certain financial licenses. That is why he has no credit cards. Marissa, that is why everything is in your name. He is not just bad with money. He is radioactive to the banking system. No reputable bank will touch him." Dana leaned forward, closing the file. "The picture is clear," she said. "The Holt family is racing against a collection clock. There is a judgment against Derek Lang for $180,000, plus interest. They are terrified the court is going to garnish what little they have left. This marriage is not a union, it is an asset transfer. They are looking for a solvent host to attach the debt to." She looked at me expectantly. "We have enough for fraud charges right now. We can have the police at your door in an hour." I looked at the evidence. The forged signature, the fake name, the hidden clauses. If I arrested him now, he would play the victim. He would claim it was a misunderstanding, a mistake of passion. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Not yet. Marissa, this is dangerous." Dana warned. "If you sign the wrong thing—" "I won't sign anything," I interrupted. "I want them to believe they have won. I want them to walk into the bank thinking they are about to clear out my accounts. and I want to see the light go out of their eyes when the trap snaps shut. I took a pen and pulled a fresh legal pad toward me. I wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. Give them access, but on my terms. We are going to give them exactly what they want. I told Caleb and Dana, set up the honeypot. I returned to the penthouse with the brightness of a morning television host. I dropped my keys on the console table, making sure the sound drew their attention. The three of them were huddled in the living room like conspirators, but they broke apart the moment I walked in. Good news. I chirped, flashing a smile that felt tight on my face. The bank apologized for the error. The freeze has been lifted temporarily. We can go to the venue tomorrow and finally put down that deposit. The collective exhale from the Holt family was so powerful it almost fogged the windows. Lenora actually clutched her chest, her eyes closing in relief. They looked like drowning sailors who had just spotted land, completely unaware that the island was a mirage. I knew it would work out, Gavin said, rushing over to kiss my cheek. You just needed to talk to them. Babe. I also noticed the cell reception has been spotty with the storm, I added helpfully. So I set up a dedicated guest network for you all. It is on the fridge. I had taped a piece of paper there. Caldwell guest, password family first. It was a honeypot. The moment their devices connected, I was logging every packet of data, every site visited, and every unencrypted message. It was a digital dragnet, and they swam right into it. To sweeten the pot, I left my iPad Pro on the side table in the library, the cover folded back, the screen seemingly unlocked. Then I announced I was going to take a long bath. I went to the master bedroom, locked the door, and opened the feed from the pinhole camera I had hidden in the bookshelf spine of a vintage encyclopedia. It took less than 5 minutes. Jace slid into the room. He looked over his shoulder, checking the hallway, before sitting at my desk. He pulled a black USB drive from his pocket and jammed it into the side of my tablet. He began typing furiously, trying to run a script to scrape passwords or mirror the drive. He thought he was a hacker. In reality, he was providing me with a high-definition recording of a felony. The camera caught his face, the insertion of the device, and the unauthorized access attempt. It was beautiful. While Jace was playing spy, Bridget was busy digging her own grave in the guest room. My audio surveillance picked up her voice clearly. She was on the phone, and the tone was officious and fake. Yes, this is Margaret Stone, representing Ms. Caldwell. She lied, her voice trembling slightly. My client is currently incapacitated due to a severe mental health crisis. We need immediate emergency access to authorize a transfer to her fiancé for medical management. I listened as the bank representative on the other end, who had already been briefed by me, calmly asked for verification. Her middle name, Bridget, stammered. It is Anne. It is definitely Anne. It was not Anne. And the notary stamp on this fax seems to have expired 3 years ago. Ma'am, the banker replied. Bridget hung up, cursing under her breath. I saved the audio file to the cloud folder labeled Evidence. She had just attempted wire fraud and identity theft, and I had it in stereo sound. I spent the rest of the afternoon turning my home into a forensic laboratory. I tweaked the motion sensors to log timestamps for every room entry. I ensured the cloud backups were redundant. By the time I emerged for dinner, I held enough digital leverage to bury them for a decade. Gavin found me on the balcony. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. I am really proud of you, he whispered. I know my family can be intense, but you are handling it so well now. You are finally being the partner I need. He thought he had broken me. He thought I had reverted to the obedient, check-writing fiancé. I leaned back into his embrace, letting him feel like the conqueror. I just want us to be happy. I lied softly. In fact, why don't we all go to the venue tasting tomorrow? Your mom, Jace, Bridget, everyone. It will be a nice family moment before we sign the check. That sounds perfect, Gavin said, kissing my neck. He had no idea. He saw a family outing. I saw a line of defendants walking into a courtroom. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. I didn't toss or turn. I didn't worry about the $180,000. I slept with the peaceful, heavy rest of an executioner who knows that the guillotine has been sharpened and the basket is waiting. Tomorrow. They would pull the lever themselves. The Everglen Glass House was a cathedral of light and humidity, a venue designed to make people feel like they were standing inside a diamond. The air smelled of expensive orchids and money. The venue manager, a polished woman with a shark-like smile, set a tablet down on the glass table. The screen displayed the initial deposit required to secure the date, $25,000. Lenora did not even look at the price. She was too busy criticizing the sample menu with the air of a woman who had never cooked a meal in her life but certainly knew how to complain about one. This menu is entirely too pedestrian. Lenora sniffed, waving a manicured hand at the list. Chicken at a Holt wedding. Absolutely not. We need the surf and turf option, and the lighting package needs to be the platinum tier. The amber gel makes everyone look jaundiced. Change it. She was ordering upgrades like she was the one footing the bill. It was the arrogance of the parasite. I smiled sweetly and held out the digital stylus. You are absolutely right, Lenora, I said, my voice dripping with false admiration. You have such an eye for detail. Why don't you sign for the upgrades? It ensures everything meets the Holt family standard. Lenora beamed. It was a trap baited with vanity, and she swallowed it whole. She took the stylus and signed her name with a flourish, validating the new total. The manager took the tablet back and swiped the card on file the account Gavin believed controlled the wedding funds. The machine let out a sharp, dissonant beep. The manager frowned, tapping the screen. I am sorry. It says declined. Code 05. Account frozen. The silence that descended on the table was absolute. The background music seemed to stop. Gavin's face went the color of ash. That is impossible, Gavin stammered, his laugh nervous and high-pitched. Run it again. It's a glitch. The manager tried again. Beep. Declined again. Sir, she said, her voice cooling considerably. I took a sip of my sparkling water, the bubbles popping against my lip. Well, I said, my tone flat and clinical. If the card is frozen, it means the account Gavin manages no longer has enough credibility to pass a security check. It seems the bank disagrees with your valuation of your assets. Lenora flushed a deep, ugly crimson. She scrambled for her purse. This is ridiculous. I will handle it. She pulled out her reserve card, the one I had cut off days ago. Beep. Declined. She pulled out another. Beep. Declined. A group of other potential clients touring the venue had stopped to watch. They were whispering. The humiliation was public now. I saw Sloane Ryder, who had tagged along, take a subtle step away from Lenora, distancing herself from the smell of failure. Gavin grabbed my wrist under the table, his grip painful. He leaned in, his breath hot and frantic against my ear. You, he hissed. You did this. You are doing this on purpose to embarrass me in front of them. I turned to look at him, my eyes dead. I am just respecting the boundaries you set. Gavin, I whispered back. You told me your family business was none of my business, so I stopped making it my business to pay for it. Before he could respond, the glass doors at the front of the venue opened. A woman in a nondescript gray suit walked in with purpose. She wasn't looking at the flowers. She was scanning faces. She locked onto our table and walked straight over. Excuse me, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I am looking for a Mr. Lang Derek Lang. Gavin froze. He didn't just stop moving. He turned into a statue. The name hung in the air like a curse. I think you have the wrong person, he croaked. I don't think I do, the woman said, dropping a thick envelope onto the table right on top of the wedding menu. You are served. This is a summons regarding the enforcement of the civil judgment. Lenora saw the government seal on the envelope and lost her mind. The veneer of the wealthy matriarch vanished, replaced by pure, unfiltered panic. She lunged for the papers, forgetting where she was. No, she shrieked, her voice cracking. They can't serve us yet. If they file to seize the assets before the wedding, we are dead. We need the marriage certificate first. The entire room heard it. The manager heard it. The bystanders heard it. She had just screamed out the conspiracy. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress. I did not finish them there. That would be too merciful. I needed to assemble the full audience for the final act. It seems you have some family issues to discuss, I said calmly, looking down at Gavin, who was staring at the table as if it were a bomb. I will see you all tomorrow. We will handle this privately. I walked out of the glass house, the sound of Lenora's sobbing echoing behind me, leaving them alone with the wreckage of their own greed. I sent the text at exactly 8 in the morning. It was brief, devoid of emojis or endearments. 10 o'clock this morning. Come to this address. Bring your ID. Gavin replied instantly with a thumbs up. He likely thought I was summoning him to a lawyer's office to sign a check that would make his legal problems disappear. He thought I was capitulating to save my own face. He walked into the lobby of North Star Ledger and Risk at 5 minutes to 10, wearing his best suit, looking like a man ready to accept an apology. I watched him on the security monitor as the receptionist directed him to the private elevator. I saw his confidence falter when he stepped onto the executive floor. The air up here was different, silent, pressurized, and smelling of ozone and fear. He walked down the long corridor and stopped in front of the frosted glass double doors. He read the silver placard on the wall, Office of the CEO. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. It was the first time he realized that I did not just have money, I had power. I was not just an heiress sitting on a trust fund. I was the architect of a risk management empire. He pushed the door open. I was sitting at the head of a conference table that could seat 20 people. I was not wearing the soft pastels he liked. I was wearing a charcoal structure suit, my hair pulled back into a severe bun. I did not stand up. I did not smile. Sit down, I said, my voice stripping the room of oxygen. This is a business meeting. Gavin laughed nervously, pulling out a chair. Babe, what is this? This place is intense. I did not respond. I simply slid a thick black folder across the polished granite surface. It stopped exactly in front of him. Open it. He flipped the cover. The first page was the log of his transaction history, highlighting the spa days and the champagne bills. The second was the high-resolution photo of him and Sloane at the boutique. The third was a still frame from the hidden camera showing Jace inserting the USB drive into my iPad. The fourth was a transcript of Bridget's fraudulent call to the bank, and the final document was a copy of the summons for Derek Lang. Gavin paled, his hands shaking as he touched the paper. The charm disintegrated. He slumped in the chair, looking small. Marisa, I can explain, he stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. It isn't what it looks like. It was just a temporary liquidity issue. I was going to pay you back. I swear. Every single cent. Just don't make this a scene. You have nothing to pay me with. Gavin, I said, leaning forward slightly. Or should I call you Derek? You have no assets. You have no credit. You have nothing but a signature. I placed 2 documents on the table. Option A, I said. You sign this termination of engagement. You sign this confession of debt. You and your family vacate my property within 48 hours. If you do this, I seal the file. And option B, he whispered. I hand this folder to the district attorney. I replied calmly. Felony fraud, identity theft, unauthorized access to a protected computer system, violation of your previous civil judgment terms. You will go to prison. Gavin, his eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a weakness. Then, his expression hardened. He thought he found one. He leaned back, crossing his arms, trying to summon a shred of bravado. "You can't do that," he sneered, his voice gaining a nasty edge. "Think about your reputation. You are a CEO. If I go to the press, if I tell them the genius behind North Star was scammed by her own fiancé, you will be a laughingstock. Your stock price will tank. You are afraid of scandal." "Marissa, I know you—" I didn't blink. I picked up a remote control and pressed a single button. The smart glass wall behind me turned opaque, transforming into a screen. A single email was displayed. The subject line read, "Protocol Black Glass." "I anticipated you would try to use leverage," I said, so I removed it. The board of directors was briefed at 7 this morning. Our PR firm has already drafted the press release framing this as a successful internal security stress test. We caught the fraud before it executed. To the world, I won't be a victim. I will be the CEO who detected a threat and neutralized it. I tapped the table. Your access badges have been deactivated. Your devices have been remotely wiped of my data. You are locked out. Gavin stared at the screen. The color drained from his lips. He realized he was bringing a knife to a drone strike. You are a monster," he choked out. "I am an auditor." I corrected him. "And you are just a line item expense that I am deleting." I pointed to the papers. "Sign. Now." He signed. The pen shook in his hand, scratching against the paper. He threw the pen down and stormed out of the office, his eyes burning with a hatred that promised this wasn't over. But as the door clicked shut, I simply closed the folder. The first phase was complete. Now, I just had to wait for them to make one last desperate mistake. The retaliation began exactly as I predicted: messy, loud, and cowardly. Within hours of leaving my office, the Holt family took their grievances to the internet. They flooded social media with vague, tear-jerking posts about surviving financial abuse and escaping a controlling narcissist. They were careful, though. They never used my name or the name of my company, terrified of the libel laws they knew I would enforce. It was a smear campaign designed to be just blurry enough to avoid a lawsuit, but clear enough to garner sympathy from their circle. But while they were playing games on social media, they were making fatal errors in the real world. At 11 o'clock that morning, the Chief Information Security Officer of North Star called me. An anonymous email had been sent to 3 of my key investors. Attached to the email was a file titled Proof of Laundering, containing what looked like incriminating spreadsheets. My security team intercepted it instantly. "Ms. Caldwell," the officer said, his voice amused. "The digital fingerprint on the attachment matches the honeypot file you planted on the guest server. The sender thought they were using a VPN, but the tracking pixel fired before the encryption kicked in." I looked at the data report. The email had been sent from a laptop registered to Jace Holt, utilizing the bandwidth of the Caldwell guest network I had graciously provided. Jace had taken the bait I left on the open iPad, stolen the fake files, and tried to blackmail me with them. He thought he was a whistleblower. In reality, he had just committed federal corporate espionage and wire fraud with a single click. Bridget was busy tightening the noose around her own neck as well. My private banker forwarded me an audio file from the fraud department. It was a recording of a call made 30 minutes prior. A woman claiming to be me using a social security number that was 1 digit off was screaming at the operator, demanding emergency access to wire funds to a third party. I am currently traveling and lost my wallet." The voice on the recording shrieked, cracking with panic. "Just authorize the transfer. Why are you making this so hard?" It was Bridget. There was no denying that shrill, entitled tone. She was impersonating an account holder to bypass security. That was another felony to add to the list. The desperation reached a fever pitch at 2 in the morning. My hallway camera alerted me to movement. Gavin was standing outside my front door, soaked from the rain, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He punched the keypad, trying old codes. When they failed, he started kicking the heavy oak door. "Let me in!" he screamed, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. "I know you are in there. You can't just lock me out of my life." He picked up a heavy planter and looked like he was about to smash the glass panel next to the frame. That was when the building security team, whom I had alerted hours ago, stepped off the elevator. 2 uniformed officers followed them. I watched on the monitor as they restrained him. I saw the police write up the incident report for trespassing and attempted property damage. I did not press charges. Not yet. If I had him arrested then, it would be a messy domestic dispute. I needed them all in one room. I needed them to believe there was still a chance to negotiate, so I could drop the guillotine on all of them at once. I waited until noon the next day to send the text message to the group chat. 2 o'clock this afternoon, Iron Vault Trust, Private Meeting Room B. This is your final chance to settle this before I file the legal paperwork. They replied immediately. They thought I was cracking. They thought the pressure of the smear campaign and the late-night visit had broken my resolve. They thought they were coming to collect a settlement. I made 2 more calls. The first was to Caleb. "Get Sloan Ryder," I instructed. "Tell her if she comes to the bank at 2. I will explain everything about the money. Tell her she needs to hear the truth before she commits to the Holts." The second call was to a contact Caleb had dug up from the court archives in Chicago, a ghost from Derek Lang's past. "The meeting is set," I told the voice on the other end. "There is a seat waiting for you. I arrived at Iron Vault Trust early. The conference room was a glass box of silence." I arranged the seating carefully. On my side, a tape recorder, my attorney Dana, and a representative from the bank's risk management division. On their side, 3 chairs, and in the corner, a single empty chair, turned slightly away from the table, waiting for the final witness who would drive the last nail into their coffin. The air inside the private conference room at Iron Vault Trust was colder than a morgue, and the silence was brittle enough to snap. Lenora sat across from me, her face twisted in a mask of righteous indignation. She did not look like a woman who had been caught. She looked like a woman who was about to demand a refund. "This entire charade has been a nightmare for my mental health," Lenora declared, slamming her hand on the polished table. "I want $50,000. Call it a settlement for emotional distress and wasted time. We will walk away, but we expect to be compensated." Gavin nodded beside her, leaning forward with a look of practiced sorrow. "Marissa, you have been controlling and paranoid for months," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Just pay the settlement so we can all move on. You owe us that much." I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached out and pressed the play button on the small digital recorder sitting in the center of the table. The room was suddenly filled with the sound of Lenora's voice, crisp and clear, recorded from my hallway. "The deadline on the file is the 1st of the month. If we do not show liquidity by then, they will move to seize the assets." Lenora froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I let the recording run. "We just need him to sign the marriage license. $180,000. Small change for her." The silence that followed was heavy. Gavin looked at the recorder as if it were a bomb. But I was not done. I pointed the remote at the wall monitor. The video of Jace inserting the USB drive into my iPad played in high definition. Next to it, a log of the emails sent to my investors appeared. "The digital footprint is undeniable," the bank's risk management officer said, his voice flat and professional. "We traced the malicious emails directly to the device used by Mr. Jace Holt. This is no longer a domestic dispute. This is corporate espionage and attempted extortion." Jace sank low in his chair, pulling his hood up as if to hide. "And regarding the bank access, my lawyer, Dana, said, sliding a transcript across the table toward Bridget, we have a recording of a woman impersonating Ms. Caldwell to authorize a wire transfer. Falsifying a power of attorney and lying to a federally insured financial institution is a felony. We are looking at 5 to 10 years. Bridget turned a sickly shade of gray. She looked at Gavin, pleading with her eyes, but Gavin was paralyzed. Then, the door opened. Sloane Ryder walked in. She was trembling, but her chin was held high. She refused to look at Gavin. She looked straight at Lenora. "You told me to wait," Sloane said, her voice shaking with anger. "You told me to be patient. You coached me on how to dress like her. You said that once the wedding happened, the money would flow and she would be out of the picture." "You lied," Lenora gasped, reaching out a hand. "Sloane, honey, don't touch me," Sloane snapped, stepping back. I turned to the empty chair in the corner. "We have one last guest," I announced. A stern woman in a gray suit stood up and walked to the table. She placed a thick file down in front of Gavin. "Derek Lang," she said, her voice like a gavel striking wood. "My name is Agent Clark from the Illinois Judgment Enforcement Division. You are currently in violation of a court order regarding your restitution payments. You are fleeing execution of a judgment." Gavin or Derek slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. The game was over. The pieces were all on the board. That was when Lenora snapped. She stood up, her chair screeching against the floor, her eyes wild with panic. "It was supposed to be easy," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "All you had to do was sign the marriage license. It is just a piece of paper. Why won't you just cooperate? We would have paid it back eventually." The confession rang through the room. She had admitted to the conspiracy in front of a lawyer, a bank officer, and a federal agent. "That is an admission of intent to defraud," the bank representative stated, standing up. "I am freezing all accounts associated with the Holt family immediately pending a criminal investigation. Security is waiting outside." The two large guards by the door took a step forward. The exit was blocked. I slid a single piece of paper toward Gavin. "I am not unreasonable," I said softly. "Sign this." "It is a full confession of financial impropriety, a waiver of all claims against me, and a permanent restraining order. You sign this, and I let you walk out of here before the police arrive. You do not sign, and Agent Clark takes you into custody right now." Gavin looked at the handcuffs on the agent's belt. He looked at me. His eyes were burning with hate, but his hand was trembling with fear. He grabbed the pen. He signed his real name so hard the tip tore through the paper. "Get out," I said. The guards escorted them out. Lenora was sobbing. Jace was silent. Gavin looked back at me one last time. A broken man who realized too late that he had tried to rob the wrong woman. I sat alone in the quiet room. I picked up the thick black folder labeled Operation Silent Ledger. I closed it. The click of the binder sounded like a vault door slamming shut. The account was settled. The balance was 0, and I had never felt richer. Thank you so much for listening to my story and following this journey of justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment down below with your country or city so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing the truth come to light, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people. Stay safe, and never let anyone underestimate you.